My name is Sadie Miller, and I'm 57 years old. Standing in my kitchen that Friday evening, chopping vegetables for what I thought would be just another ordinary dinner, I had no idea how much my world was about to change. The sound of muffled laughter drifted from the living room where my two daughters sat huddled together, whispering about something they called a surprise dinner. My heart fluttered with that familiar maternal hope. Maybe, just maybe, after all these years of putting everyone else first, they were finally planning something special for me. Before I share what happened next, let me ask you wonderful people watching, where are you tuning in from tonight? Please hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't already, because this story about family betrayal might just change how you see your own relationships forever. Let me paint you a picture of my life before that devastating weekend. 8 years ago, my marriage crumbled like a house of cards. My ex-husband decided he wanted a younger model, leaving me with 2 teenage daughters and a mountain of bills. Emma was 20 at the time, just starting college, while Sophia was 17 and preparing for her senior year of high school. I became a master of juggling. Every morning at 7, I'd start my shift as a receptionist at Dr. Hamilton's dental office downtown. The pay wasn't much, but it covered our basic needs and gave us health insurance. After racing home to check on the girls and throw together some semblance of dinner, I'd head to my evening job at Morrison's grocery store, stocking shelves and running the late shift register until 11 at night. Those years blurred together in a haze of exhaustion and determination. While other women my age were enjoying date nights and girls' trips, I was packing lunches, attending parent-teacher conferences, and working every overtime hour I could get my hands on. I missed countless social events, turned down invitations from friends, and put my own dreams on the back burner. But seeing my daughters succeed made every sacrifice worthwhile. Emma graduated summa cum laude with a business degree and quickly landed a position at a prestigious marketing firm. She married David, a certified public accountant, 3 years ago, in a beautiful ceremony that I managed to pay for by taking out a small loan against the house. They moved to a gorgeous colonial in the affluent Maple Heights neighborhood, complete with granite countertops and a 3-car garage. Sophia followed a similar path, earning her degree in communications and securing a job as a marketing assistant at a tech startup. She'd been dating Marcus for 2 years now, and I could tell from the way her eyes sparkled when she talked about him that this relationship was serious. His family owned a chain of successful restaurants, and he drove the kind of car that cost more than I made in a year. Both my girls had achieved the American dream I'd worked so hard to give them. They drove luxury vehicles, wore designer clothes, and lived in apartments with amenities I could only imagine. Yet despite their newfound prosperity, they still came home every few weeks expecting the same royal treatment they'd received as children. Without fail, they'd arrive empty-handed and immediately start making requests. Could I whip up my famous pot roast? Did I have any of those dinner rolls they loved? Would I mind doing a load of their laundry while the food was cooking? I always said yes, of course. What mother wouldn't want to take care of her children? But lately something had shifted in their behavior. During recent visits, they'd exchange meaningful glances when they thought I wasn't looking. They'd step outside to take phone calls or huddle in corners speaking in hushed tones about plans and preparations. When I'd ask what they were discussing, they'd brush me off with vague responses about work projects or friend drama. I convinced myself they were planning something special for my upcoming 58th birthday, still 3 weeks away. Maybe they were finally ready to show their appreciation for all those years of sacrifice. Maybe this would be the moment when they'd recognize everything I'd given up for their happiness and success. That Friday morning started like any other, but fate had different plans. I left for work earlier than usual because Dr. Hamilton had scheduled an emergency root canal, and I wanted to get the office ready before the patient arrived. In my rush out the door, I completely forgot my phone sitting on the kitchen counter next to my coffee mug. Around 10:30, I realized my mistake when I went to check the time. My phone contained my entire life from appointment reminders to grocery lists, and I felt naked without it. Dr. Hamilton kindly let me run home during my lunch break to retrieve it. I slipped quietly through the front door, not wanting to disturb anyone if the girls were still sleeping. That's when I heard Emma's voice carrying clearly from the living room, and something in her tone made me freeze in place. "Mom's house has the perfect dining room," Emma was saying into her phone, "and her cooking is always amazing. We couldn't possibly host this anywhere else." I pressed myself against the hallway wall, my heart pounding as I realized I was about to overhear something I probably wasn't supposed to. Sophia's voice joined the conversation from what sounded like the kitchen. "We need to make sure everything is perfect for the announcement. This is such a huge moment for both of us." "Absolutely," Emma agreed. "I've already written down the complete menu. We'll need Mom's famous pot roast with those little red potatoes. She does the garlic mashed potatoes, fresh green beans, and definitely her homemade dinner rolls. Oh, and that chocolate cake for dessert. You know, the one with the cream cheese frosting." My chest swelled with pride despite my confusion. They were planning something that required my best dishes, which meant this was definitely important. "Perfect," Sophia responded. "I'll call Marcus and tell him 7 o'clock sharp. David can pick up the wine on his way over." "What about Jennifer and Michael? Are they confirmed?" "Yes, and Lisa and James too. So that's 8 people total, including us." 8 people! A dinner party in my home featuring my cooking. This had to be the birthday celebration I'd been hoping for. But then Emma's next words sent a chill down my spine. "We just need to make sure Mom understands her role in all this. She needs to cook everything perfectly and then basically stay in the kitchen while we're eating. This is our special night, not about her." "Right," Sophia chimed in with a laugh. "She's so much better at the hosting stuff anyway. We can handle the actual celebration while she takes care of the food service." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. Food service. They were talking about me like I was catering staff, not their mother. "Should we tell her about the engagement announcement?" Sophia asked. "And our house news," Emma added. "Though maybe we should keep it as a surprise until the actual dinner. You know how Mom gets when she knows about plans in advance? She always wants to be involved in every detail." Engagement announcement. House news. My daughters were planning to share life-changing moments with their friends while relegating me to kitchen duty like hired help. I grabbed my phone from the counter and slipped back outside, my hands shaking as I sat in my car trying to process what I'd just heard. Part of me wanted to march back inside and confront them immediately, but a larger part needed time to think this through. Maybe I'd misunderstood. Maybe they planned to include me after the initial announcement. Maybe they just wanted everything to be perfect and thought I'd be more comfortable handling the cooking. I spent the rest of my workday replaying their conversation, searching for any interpretation that would make their behavior acceptable. When I got home that evening, I waited for them to mention the dinner party to ask for my help to include me in their planning. They said nothing. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn air that usually filled me with energy and optimism. Instead, I felt heavy with dread as I watched Emma's silver sedan pull into my driveway at 8 o'clock sharp, followed immediately by Sophia's white SUV. They came through my front door like generals preparing for battle, each carrying multiple shopping bags from Whole Foods and Target. I'd barely finished my first cup of coffee before they were rearranging my furniture and transforming my modest dining room into something that belonged in a magazine. Emma unpacked expensive-looking candles, cloth napkins I'd never seen before, and a centerpiece of white roses and baby's breath that must have cost more than my weekly grocery budget. Meanwhile, Sophia connected her phone to my old stereo system and began testing different playlists. "Good morning to you, too," I said, trying to keep my voice light despite the growing knot in my stomach. "Oh, morning, Mom," Emma replied without looking up from the elaborate place settings she was arranging. "We're having some friends over tonight. Nothing big. Nothing big. Those words stung more than she probably intended. Sophia emerged from behind my china cabinet where she'd been rearranging my dishes to accommodate her color scheme. We were hoping you could help with dinner, though. You know how amazing your cooking is, and we really want tonight to be special. There it was. The request disguised as a compliment delivered with that sweet tone they'd perfected as children when they wanted something. Of course, sweetheart, I heard myself say, even as my heart sank. What's the special occasion? The two of them exchanged one of those meaningful looks I'd been noticing more and more lately. Just catching up with friends, Emma answered quickly. You know how it is. Actually, I didn't know how it was, since my friends had gradually disappeared over the years as I devoted every spare moment to my daughter's needs. But I didn't say that. Instead, I asked the question that had been burning in my chest since yesterday. Am I invited to join you all? The silence that followed felt like an eternity. Emma stopped adjusting the napkins and finally looked at me directly, her expression uncomfortable but determined. Well, it's more of a young people thing, Mom. You know how it is with different generations. The conversation topics, the music, the energy level. But we really need your help in the kitchen, Sophia added quickly, as if her enthusiasm for my labor would soften the blow of my exclusion. You're so much better at cooking than we are. We'd probably burn everything. I stared at my daughters, these two successful, intelligent women I'd raised to be strong and independent, and tried to reconcile them with the people standing in my living room treating me like an employee. So let me understand this correctly, I said slowly. You want to host a dinner party in my house using my dishes and furniture, eating food that I cook and serve, but you don't want me to actually participate in the dinner itself. Mom, don't make it sound weird, Emma protested. We just thought you'd prefer to focus on what you do best. You always seem happiest when you're taking care of people. The assumption in that statement hit me like a slap. When had I ever indicated that I preferred to work while others enjoyed themselves? When had I suggested that my greatest joy came from being excluded from social gatherings in my own home? But old habits die hard, and the maternal instinct to avoid disappointing my children overrode my common sense. Fine, I said, already hating myself for agreeing. I'll take care of the cooking. The relief on their faces made my decision feel even worse. I spent the rest of the morning at the grocery store purchasing ingredients for the elaborate menu they'd planned without consulting me. Prime beef for the roast organic vegetables, fresh herbs, heavy cream for the mashed potatoes, and all the components for a chocolate cake that would take 3 hours to properly prepare. As I pushed my cart through the aisles, I calculated the cost of this dinner in my head. Between the groceries and the time I'd spend cooking this small gathering would cost me nearly $200 and an entire day of work. Money and time I couldn't really afford to give. But they were my daughters, and I'd been sacrificing for them for so long that it felt as natural as breathing. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, my kitchen smelled like a 5-star restaurant. The pot roast was perfectly tender. The potatoes were fluffy and golden, and the green beans were bright emerald perfection. I'd even managed to bake a chocolate cake that looked like something from a professional bakery. I'd also taken care to dress nicely for the evening, choosing my best black slacks and the royal blue blouse Emma had given me for Christmas. I'd styled my hair and put on the pearl earrings my own mother had left me. If I was going to meet their friends even briefly, I wanted to make a good impression. That's when the guests began to arrive. David, Emma's husband, was first through the door at exactly 7 o'clock, carrying a bottle of wine that probably cost more than my monthly cable bill. He was followed by Marcus, Sophia's boyfriend, looking polished and confident in his expensive suit. Then came the other couples, Jennifer and Michael, Lisa and James, all of them young, successful, and beautifully dressed for what was clearly a very special occasion. I smoothed my blouse and prepared to be introduced as the proud mother of the hostesses. Instead, Emma quickly ushered everyone into the living room while Sophia practically pushed me toward the kitchen. "Mom, could you please start getting the appetizers ready?" Emma asked in a tone that managed to be both sweet and firm. "We want everything to be perfect tonight." "Of course, but I'd love to meet your friends first. Maybe I could join you for just a few minutes while everyone gets settled." Sophia intervened before Emma could respond. "The thing is, we really want to focus on our guests right now. You understand, right? Maybe you could just handle the food service tonight. You're so good at timing everything perfectly." The phrase food service hung in the air between us like a neon sign. In that moment, I finally understood exactly how my daughters saw me. Not as their mother, not as the woman who'd sacrificed everything for their success, but as convenient kitchen staff who happened to live in a house suitable for entertaining. "I see," I said quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "You're the best mom," Emma said, already turning away to rejoin her guests. I retreated to my kitchen where I arranged shrimp cocktail and stuffed mushrooms on the good china plates they'd selected from my cabinet. Through the doorway, I could hear laughter and conversation as my daughters introduced their friends to each other, playing the perfect hostesses in my dining room. When the appetizers were ready, I carried the tray into the dining room, expecting at least a brief introduction. Instead, I was met with polite smiles from the guests and grateful nods from my daughters, as if I were indeed professional catering staff providing a service. "Thank you," Jennifer said warmly, taking a shrimp from my tray. "These look delicious." "You're welcome," I replied, waiting for Emma to explain who I was. The explanation never came. Instead, Emma simply said, "Mom, could you check on the roast? I think it might be ready soon." I was being dismissed from my own dining room. Back in the kitchen, I stood at the sink washing serving spoons and listening to fragments of conversation that drifted in from the other room. They were talking about careers and travel plans, sharing stories about mutual friends I'd never heard of, laughing at inside jokes that reminded me how completely I'd been excluded from their adult lives. "So, when are you going to make the announcement?" I heard Marcus ask, his voice carrying clearly through the pass-through window. "After the main course," Emma replied. "When everyone's relaxed and happy." My heart began to race. What announcement? What had I missed during their hushed phone conversations and secretive planning sessions? I served the main course with the efficiency of a professional waitress, placing perfectly arranged plates before each guest while they continued their animated conversation. The pot roast was tender enough to cut with a fork, the vegetables were seasoned to perfection, and the homemade rolls were golden brown and steaming. "This is incredible," Michael commented, taking his first bite. "You guys are so lucky to have such an amazing cook in the family." "We really are," Sophia agreed, not bothering to look in my direction. I returned to the kitchen and began washing the pots and pans, trying to ignore the growing ache in my chest. Through the window, I watched my daughters hold court at my dining table, animated and glowing, as they entertained their friends with stories I'd never heard. Then Emma stood up, gently tapping her wine glass with her fork to get everyone's attention. The conversation died down as all eyes turned toward her, and I found myself unconsciously moving closer to the doorway to hear what was about to unfold. "David and I have some incredible news to share with our closest friends," she announced, her voice bright with excitement. I held my breath, wondering if perhaps I'd misunderstood everything. Maybe this was the moment when she'd call me in to share in their joy. "We just bought our dream house," she continued, beaming as David wrapped his arm around her shoulders. "A beautiful 4-bedroom colonial in Maple Heights with a wraparound porch and the most amazing kitchen you've ever seen." The table erupted in congratulations and applause. I watched through the doorway as my daughter shared one of the most important moments of her adult life with everyone except the woman who'd made that moment possible through years of sacrifice. But Emma wasn't finished. As the excitement died down, Sophia rose from her chair, her face glowing with happiness. "Well, since we're sharing big news," she said, extending her left hand toward the table. "Marcus and I got engaged last weekend. The celebration that followed was even more enthusiastic than the first announcement. I watched as the other women gathered around Sophia to admire her engagement ring as the men clapped Marcus on the back and offered their congratulations. Wine glasses were refilled, toasts were made, and my dining room filled with the kind of joy that should have included the bride-to-be's mother. Instead, I stood alone in my kitchen feeling like a stranger in my own home. "We wanted to celebrate with the people who truly matter to us," I heard Emma say as the initial excitement settled into warm conversation about wedding plans and house hunting. "Our real family," Sophia added with a laugh. "The ones who've supported our dreams and been there through everything." Those words hit me harder than any physical blow ever could. Real family. The people who truly mattered. After 28 years of putting my daughter's needs before my own, after working multiple jobs to pay for their education, after sacrificing my social life and financial security to ensure their success, I apparently didn't qualify for either category. "Where's your mom anyway?" Marcus asked, looking around the dining room. "Shouldn't she know about the engagement?" "Oh, she's busy in the kitchen," Sophia replied with casual dismissal. "She's more comfortable there anyway. You know how some people are just natural caregivers?" The laughter that followed felt like acid in my ears. They were discussing me like I was a beloved family pet, useful and well-meaning, but not quite human enough to be included in the important moments. I set down the dish towel I'd been clutching and stared at my reflection in the kitchen window. When had I become this invisible woman, this background figure in my own daughter's lives? When had I stopped being Sadie Miller, the woman who'd built a life from nothing and become simply Mom, the convenient service provider? The chocolate cake sat on the counter before me, perfectly frosted and waiting to be the grand finale of their celebration. 3 layers of rich chocolate with cream cheese frosting decorated with fresh berries I'd arranged by hand. Hours of work created with love for daughters who saw me as nothing more than kitchen staff. That's when something inside me finally broke. I removed my apron with hands that had stopped shaking and folded it carefully on the counter next to the untouched cake. 28 years of automatic obedience, of putting everyone else's needs first, of accepting whatever scraps of affection and respect my daughters chose to throw my way, ended in that moment. Without a word to anyone, I collected my purse and car keys from the hall closet. The sound of laughter and conversation continued to drift from the dining room as I quietly opened the back door and stepped into the cool evening air. My hands trembled as I started the car, not from fear, but from the unfamiliar sensation of putting my own needs first. For the first time in decades, I was walking away from a situation that hurt me instead of enduring it with a smile. I drove aimlessly through the familiar streets of my neighborhood, past the elementary school, where I'd volunteered countless hours when the girls were young, past the park, where I'd pushed them on swings and bandaged their scraped knees. The memories that had always brought me comfort now felt like evidence of a life spent in service to people who'd never learned to value that service. Eventually, I found myself at Rosie's Diner, the 24-hour restaurant where I'd sometimes treat myself to coffee and pie when money was particularly tight. The waitress, a kind woman named Betty who'd been working there for 20 years, recognized me immediately. "Sadie, you're all dressed up tonight. Special occasion." I almost laughed at the irony. "You could say that, Betty. Just coffee tonight, please." I sat in my usual corner booth watching other families share meals and conversation and tried to process the magnitude of what had just happened. My daughters had reached 2 of the most important milestones in their adult lives, and they'd deliberately chosen to exclude me from those moments. But even more painful than the exclusion was the realization that this behavior wasn't new. It was simply the latest and most obvious example of a pattern that had been building for years. I'd raised my daughters to be independent and successful, but somewhere along the way, I'd failed to teach them basic respect and gratitude. How many times had they come to my house expecting me to cook and clean while they relaxed? How many times had they made plans that benefited them while taking my participation for granted? How many times had I said yes to requests that made me feel used rather than loved? I thought about the birthday celebration I'd imagined, the moment of recognition and appreciation I'd hoped this dinner party would bring. Instead, I'd been given a front row seat to my own irrelevance in their lives. Betty refilled my coffee cup and patted my shoulder gently. "You okay, honey? You look like you've had a rough night." "I think I've had a rough few years," I admitted. "I'm just now figuring that out." I stayed at the diner for 2 hours watching the clock and wondering how long their celebration would last. Would they even notice I'd disappeared? Or would they simply assume I was in the kitchen continuing to clean up after their party, like the good little service provider they expected me to be? At 10:15, I finally drove home to find the house dark, except for the kitchen light I'd left on. My heart sank as I walked through the front door and saw the state of my dining room and kitchen. Every dish was dirty and stacked haphazardly on the counter. Wine glasses with lipstick stains sat abandoned on my good tablecloth, which now bore several food stains that might never come out. Empty bottles and crumpled napkins littered the table, and someone had spilled red wine on my hardwood floor. But it was the note propped against the coffee maker that finally pushed me over the edge. "Mom, thanks for dinner." Everything was absolutely perfect as always. We took some cake to go since you seemed to have disappeared during dessert time. Please clean up when you get back. You know how we are with dishes. Love you, Emma and Sophia. Love you. 2 words that would have meant everything if they'd been backed up by actions that demonstrated actual love and respect. Instead, they were the final insult, a casual sign-off on a message that treated me like a maid service they were fond of. I stood in my destroyed kitchen at nearly 11 o'clock at night, surrounded by the evidence of my daughter's complete disregard for my time and energy, and felt something I'd never experienced before: righteous anger. Not the guilty frustration I'd felt when they were teenagers testing boundaries, or the mild disappointment when they forgot to call on holidays. This was clean, pure anger at being taken for granted by the 2 people I'd sacrificed everything to raise properly. They'd had their announcements, their celebration, their perfect evening, and they'd had it all while treating me like I was invisible, someone whose feelings and dignity were irrelevant to their happiness. Well, I was done being invisible. The next morning, both of my daughters called within minutes of each other, their voices bright and cheerful, as if nothing unusual had happened the night before. "Mom, the dinner was absolutely perfect," Emma gushed through the phone. "Everyone kept asking where you learned to cook like that. Though you did disappear during dessert, where did you go?" I listened to her chatter for a moment before cutting her off mid-sentence. "Emma, I need you and your sister to come over this afternoon. Both of you together. We need to talk." Something in my tone must have caught her attention because her voice became immediately cautious. "Is everything okay? You sound different." "Just be here at 2 o'clock, both of you." I hung up before she could ask any more questions. Sophia called 10 minutes later with a similar tone of casual gratitude mixed with mild confusion about my early departure. I gave her the same message: 2 o'clock, both sisters' important conversation. The 3 hours before their arrival gave me time to prepare what I needed to say. I'd spent most of the night lying awake replaying years of interactions and finally seeing them clearly for what they were: a pattern of exploitation disguised as family love. At exactly 2 o'clock, both of my daughters walked through my front door looking slightly apprehensive but not particularly concerned. They probably expected a mild scolding about leaving dishes, or perhaps a request for details about their big announcements. They had no idea that their relationship with their mother was about to change forever. "Sit down," I said, gesturing toward the living room chairs. "Both of you." They exchanged one of their meaningful glances as they settled into their seats, and I realized that even now they were treating this conversation like an inconvenience they needed to manage together. "First," I began, "congratulations on your engagement, Sophia, and on your new house, Emma. These are huge milestones in your lives, and I'm genuinely happy for both of you." They relaxed slightly, probably thinking this would be easier than they'd feared. "However," I continued, "I need to address what happened last night because I'm not sure either of you understand how your behavior affected me." "Mom, if this is about the dishes," Emma started to interrupt. "It's not about the dishes," I said firmly. "It's about the fact that you planned a dinner party in my house to celebrate the most important announcements of your adult lives, and you deliberately excluded me from participating as anything more than kitchen staff." Sophia shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "We didn't exclude you, Mom. We just thought you'd be more comfortable handling the cooking." "More comfortable?" I repeated slowly. "Sophia, when in your entire life have I ever indicated that I prefer to work alone in the kitchen while others enjoy themselves?" "Well, no, but you're so good at it," Emma offered weakly. "And we wanted everything to be perfect." "Perfect for whom?" I asked. "Perfect for your friends who didn't even know who I was. Perfect for you who got to play hostess in my house using my dishes and furniture, or perfect for me, the woman who spent 8 hours cooking and serving a meal for people celebrating news she wasn't allowed to hear firsthand." The silence that followed was heavy with discomfort, but I wasn't finished. "Let me tell you what last night looked like from my perspective," I continued. "You planned a celebration for your engagement and new house. Instead of including me as family, you treated me like hired help. You used my home, my time, my money, and my labor to create a perfect evening for everyone except me. And then you left me with hours of cleanup while you went home to your comfortable lives." "Mom, you're being dramatic," Emma protested. "We didn't mean anything bad by it." "Intent doesn't matter when the impact is this hurtful," I replied. "And this isn't just about last night. This is about years of taking my generosity for granted, of assuming that my time and energy exist solely for your convenience." I stood up and began pacing the words I'd held back for years, finally pouring out. "When was the last time either of you invited me to dinner at your place? When was the last time you called just to ask how I'm doing, not because you needed something? When was the last time you treated me like a person with my own feelings and needs instead of just Mom? The woman who's always available to cook and clean and sacrifice." Both daughters looked stunned, as if they'd never considered these questions before. "I raised you to be strong, independent, successful women," I continued, "and you are those things. But somehow I failed to teach you basic respect and appreciation for the people who love you most." "That's not fair," Sophia said, her voice rising. "We love you, Mom. We've never said we didn't. Love is more than words, sweetheart. Love is actions. Love is consideration. Love is including someone in your important moments, not using them to make those moments possible for others." I sat back down, looking directly at both of my daughters. "So here's what's going to change. From now on, when you want to visit, you call ahead and ask if it's convenient for me. When you want me to cook, you offer to help, or you bring the groceries. When you plan celebrations in my home, I'm either included as a guest or you handle everything yourselves." "But Mom," Emma began, looking genuinely confused. "We just assumed you enjoyed taking care of us. You never complained before." "I enjoyed taking care of you when you were children," I clarified. "But you're adults now, and it's time you learned the difference between family love and family exploitation." The conversation continued for another hour, with both daughters alternating between defensive arguments and hurt confusion. They'd grown so accustomed to my automatic availability that they genuinely couldn't understand why I was suddenly setting boundaries. But I remained firm in my position, and eventually they left my house with a very different understanding of our relationship moving forward. The weeks that followed were challenging in ways I hadn't expected. Emma called several times, her voice strained as she tried to convince me I was overreacting to what she still characterized as a simple misunderstanding. Sophia went through a phase of sulking, barely speaking to me during our brief phone conversations. I held firm to my new boundaries even when doubt crept in during lonely evenings. When Emma called asking me to cater David's surprise birthday party, I politely declined and suggested she hire a real caterer. When Sophia assumed I'd host her bridal shower planning session, I explained that I'd be happy to attend as a guest, but wouldn't be organizing or cooking for the event. The first few visits after our confrontation were awkward and tense. Both daughters seemed to expect me to cave to their previous expectations to return to my role as the accommodating mother who never said no. When I didn't, they struggled to relate to me in this new dynamic. Gradually, however, something began to shift. The turning point came about 6 weeks later when Emma called asking for advice about planning David's actual birthday celebration. Instead of assuming I'd handle all the work, she asked if I'd be willing to share cooking duties with her. "I was thinking maybe we could cook together," she suggested tentatively. "Like I could handle the appetizers and sides if you wanted to do the main course. And maybe Sophia could bring dessert from that bakery she likes." For the first time in months, I heard genuine consideration in her voice. "I'd enjoy that," I replied, meaning it completely. Working together in my kitchen that weekend revealed something Emma had never experienced before: how much effort and planning went into the meals she'd always taken for granted. As she struggled to time the appetizers properly while keeping track of multiple side dishes, she began to understand the complexity of what I'd been doing single-handedly for years. "This is actually really hard," she admitted, laughing as she nearly dropped a tray of stuffed peppers. "I had no idea how much work you were doing when we just showed up and expected dinner." "It's not hard when it's appreciated," I replied. "It's only hard when it's taken for granted." That evening, David's birthday celebration felt completely different from the disastrous dinner party weeks earlier. I was introduced to his friends as Emma's mother, included in conversations, and treated like a valued guest in my own home. When someone complimented the food, Emma made sure to credit my cooking and her own contribution equally. Sophia took longer to adjust to our new relationship dynamic. She continued to struggle with the concept that my time and energy weren't automatically available whenever she needed them. When she called asking me to help address and mail 200 wedding invitations, I suggested we could spend one afternoon together working on them rather than me handling the entire project alone. "But you're so much faster at that kind of thing," she protested. "I'm faster because I've had more practice," I explained patiently. "But this is your wedding and these are your invitations. I'm happy to help, but I won't do it for you." The afternoon we spent working on invitations together turned into one of our best conversations in years. Without the pressure of me handling all the work while she relaxed, Sophia actually talked to me about her hopes and fears for married life, her career goals, and her relationship with Marcus. "I never realized how much you always did for us," she admitted as we worked. "I guess I just thought that's what mothers wanted to do." "I did want to do those things when you were children," I explained. "But continuing to do them when you're adults just enables you to avoid learning important life skills. It doesn't actually help you in the long run." By Christmas, our family dynamic had transformed into something healthier and more balanced. Both daughters had learned to plan ahead when they wanted to visit to contribute to meals instead of just consuming them, and to include me in their lives as a person rather than just a service provider. The holiday dinner that year was a collaborative effort, with Emma handling appetizers, Sophia managing side dishes, and Marcus surprising everyone by volunteering to carve the turkey. I contributed my famous desserts and handled the coordination, but for the first time in years, I actually got to sit down and enjoy the meal I'd helped create. "This is so much better than the old way," Emma commented as we all worked together to clear the table. "I feel like we're actually spending time together instead of just expecting you to wait on us. Plus, the food tastes better when everyone contributes something," Sophia added, wrapping leftovers with an efficiency I'd never seen from her before. As I watched my daughters cleaning my kitchen without being asked, laughing as they debated the proper way to load the dishwasher, I realized that my painful confrontation had given us all something precious, a genuine relationship based on mutual respect instead of one-sided sacrifice. Those first few months of boundary setting had been difficult, but they'd forced all of us to examine our assumptions about family love and responsibility. My daughters had learned that love requires effort and consideration, not just expectations and entitlement. And I had learned that teaching them these lessons, even late in their adult lives, was one of the most loving things I could do as their mother. The woman who'd stood in her kitchen being treated like kitchen staff had been replaced by someone who knew her own worth and demanded appropriate treatment. And surprisingly, once my daughters learned to treat me with respect, they seemed to genuinely enjoy spending time with me more than they ever had when I was simply their convenient caretaker. 6 months after that devastating dinner party, Sophia called to invite me to lunch at a restaurant I'd mentioned wanting to try. Not because she needed anything from me, but simply because she wanted to spend time with her mother. "My treat," she said firmly when I offered to pay. "I realize I've been taking advantage of your generosity for way too long." As we shared dessert and talked about her wedding plans, I reflected on how much had changed since that terrible evening when I'd felt invisible in my own home. The relationship I had with my daughters now was deeper and more satisfying than our previous dynamic had ever been, precisely because it was based on choice rather than obligation. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is refuse to enable their worst behavior, even when that someone is your own child. Teaching my daughters to value my contributions by temporarily withdrawing them had been painful but necessary. And the best part was that now when they said, "I love you," at the end of our phone calls, I could hear the genuine appreciation in their voices that made those words mean something real. Now when my daughters visit, they call ahead and ask if I'd like company for dinner, not if I'll cook for them. They show up with grocery bags and offers to help, treating my home like a place they're privileged to visit, rather than a free restaurant with maid service. And you know what? Those meals taste so much sweeter when we're all truly present at the table together. If you've ever found yourself in a similar situation, feeling taken for granted by the people you love most, I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Have you had to set difficult boundaries with family members? How did you find the courage to put your own needs first? Please share your experiences and hit that like button if this story resonated with you. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding your voice and demanding the respect you deserve. And please share this video with anyone who might need to hear that it's never too late to change unhealthy family patterns. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember, teaching people how to treat you is one of the most loving gifts you can give both to them and to yourself.